The prisoner transport ship cut through the darkness of space like a metal coffin drifting toward its grave. Inside the cramped holding cell, Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her forehead against the cold wall and tried to remember what sunlight felt like on her skin. It had been 3 standard months since the Zoreth Empire had captured her crew, and in that time, she had learned more about cruelty than she had in her entire 32 years of life. The Zoreth were tall creatures with scales that shifted colors depending on their mood. Their rulers had conquered over 200 species across the galaxy, and humanity was simply the latest addition to their collection. When the first Zoreth warships had appeared in Earth's solar system 5 years ago, humans had believed they might finally meet friendly neighbors among the stars. That hope had died quickly. Elena turned when she heard the cell door slide open. A Zoreth guard stood in the doorway, its scales flickering between blue and purple. Behind the guard, she could see other prisoners being led down the corridor. They were not human. One was a small creature covered in soft gray fur with large eyes that seemed to hold endless sadness. Another was tall and thin, its body made of what looked like living crystal that caught the dim light and scattered it into tiny rainbows. "Move," the guard commanded in broken universal, the common language that all conquered species were forced to learn. Elena stepped out of her cell and joined the line of prisoners. She counted 12 different species in the group, all walking with their heads down, all broken in their own ways. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of a planet Elena had never seen before. Through a small window, she caught glimpses of a gray world covered in factories and mines. Smoke rose from thousands of chimneys, creating a permanent cloud that blocked out the sun. This was Kareth Prime, the industrial heart of the Zoreth Empire, where conquered species were sent to work until their bodies gave out. When the ship landed, the prisoners were marched out into the choking air. Elena coughed as the bitter smoke filled her lungs. Around her, the other prisoners struggled too. The furry creature beside her wheezed painfully, and Elena found herself reaching out to steady it when it stumbled. "Thank you," the creature whispered in a voice like rustling leaves. "My name is Trill. I am of the Vichy people." "Elena," she replied, "human." Trill's large eyes widened slightly. "I have heard of your kind. You are the newest conquered. The Zoreth speak of you with confusion." Before Elena could ask what that meant, a Zoreth overseer cracked a pane stick against a metal post. The sound echoed across the landing platform, silencing all conversation. The overseer was larger than the guards, its scales a permanent angry red. It surveyed the prisoners with cold yellow eyes. "You are now property of the Zoreth Empire," the overseer announced. "You will work in the mines until you are no longer useful. There is no escape from Kareth Prime. There is no rescue coming. You exist only to serve." Elena looked around at the other prisoners. Most kept their eyes fixed on the ground, accepting their fate. But here and there, she saw something different, a spark of defiance that had not yet been extinguished. She made note of those faces, storing them in her memory. In her years as a captain, she had learned that even the smallest spark could start the largest fire. The prisoners were sorted into groups and assigned to different mining sectors. Elena found herself sent to Sector 7, along with Trill and the crystal being, whose name was Korax. They were given worn mining equipment and pushed into tunnels that burrowed deep into the planet's crust. The work was brutal. They mined for Zorathium, a rare mineral that powered the Empire's warships. The tunnels were hot and cramped, the air thick with dust that coated their lungs. Guards patrolled constantly, quick to use their pain sticks on anyone who moved too slowly. On her first night, Elena lay on a thin mat in the workers' barracks, her muscles screaming from the day's labor. Around her, hundreds of beings from dozens of different species tried to sleep in the crowded space. The air was filled with strange sounds as they breathed, snored, and whimpered in their rest. "You are still awake," came Trill's soft voice from nearby. Elena rolled over to face the small Vichy. "I'm thinking. About escape. About everything. Tell me, Trill, how long have the Vichy been under Zoreth rule? The small creature was quiet for a moment. 300 of your human years. We were among the first to be conquered. Once, we were a peaceful people who valued knowledge and art. Now, we are workers and servants. And the others, how many species has the Empire taken? 217, at last count. The Zoreth are efficient conquerors. They identify civilizations just advanced enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to pose a threat. They take what they want and crush any resistance. Alina was quiet, processing this information. 217 species, millions upon millions of beings, all living under the same boot. And yet, from what she had seen, none of them had tried to work together against their common enemy. Why has no one ever united against them? She asked. Trill made a sound that might have been a laugh. The Zoreth are clever. They keep the conquered species separate. They spread lies about each group, making them distrust and fear each other. The Vichy are told that the Korathi are violent savages. The Korathi are told that the Vichy are cowardly traitors. And so on, for every species. We are so busy fearing each other that we never look at our true enemy. But that's not true, Alina said. Korax helped me today when I dropped my tools. He could have let the guards punish me, but he didn't. I know, Trill replied softly. But knowing and believing are different things. 300 years of fear and propaganda are not easily overcome. Alina stared at the ceiling, her mind working. Back on Earth, humans had their own history of division and conquest. They had spent centuries fighting each other over land, resources, and ideology. But they had also learned, slowly and painfully, that unity was stronger than division. They had built nations, alliances, and eventually a world government that had allowed them to reach for the stars. And now, looking at this galaxy of oppressed peoples, Alina saw something the Zoreth had never considered. They saw 217 separate problems to be managed. Alina saw 217 potential allies. Trill, she said quietly, I want you to introduce me to everyone you trust, every species, every individual who still has some fight left in them. Can you do that? The Vichy was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Alina saw those large eyes begin to shine with something that had been missing before. Hope. Yes, Trill whispered, I can do that. In the darkness of the barracks, surrounded by the broken remains of 200 conquered civilizations, Captain Alina Vasquez began to plan the impossible. She did not know how long it would take. She did not know if she would survive to see it through. But she knew, with a certainty that burned in her chest like a flame, that the Zoreth Empire's days were numbered. The first step was always the hardest, but once it was taken, there was no turning back. 6 months passed on Karath Prime, and Alina used every moment wisely. During work shifts, she observed the patterns of the guards and learned the layout of the mines. During rest periods, she spoke with prisoners from every species she could find. And slowly, carefully, she began to build something the Zoreth had never seen before. Trill proved to be an invaluable ally. The Vichy had connections throughout the labor camp, relationships built over decades of shared suffering. Through Trill, Alina met beings of incredible diversity. There was Granak, a massive creature from a species called the Tirathi, whose forearms could bend metal but whose heart was gentle as a child's. There was Sureth, a being of living flame contained in a special suit, who remembered when her people had been free and burned with fury at their enslavement. There was Dr. Mika Okonkwo, another human captured 2 years before Alina, who had been working as a medic in the camp's infirmary. You're building an army, Mika observed one night as they huddled in a forgotten corner of the tunnels. Or trying to. Not an army, Alina replied. A family. An army can be defeated. A family protects its own. Mika raised an eyebrow. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both, Alina admitted. The hardest part was overcoming centuries of mistrust. The Zoreth had done their work well. Even prisoners who hated their oppressors still looked at other species with suspicion. Alina found that the key was not grand speeches or promises of freedom. It was small acts of kindness. When a Korathi worker named Jix collapsed from exhaustion, Alina and Gronick carried him to safety while Trill distracted the guards. When Surith's containment suit developed a crack that threatened her life, Mika spent 3 nights secretly repairing it with stolen materials. When a group of young Vichy were being tormented by a cruel overseer, Korak stood in front of them, his crystal body absorbing the pain stick's energy until the overseer grew bored and left. Word spread through the camp, passed in whispers and glances. There was a group of prisoners who helped others regardless of species. There was a human woman who treated every being as worthy of respect. And slowly, the walls the Zorath had built began to crack. "I don't understand you," Korak said to Alina one day as they worked side by side in the mines. The crystal being's voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "My people are taught that humans are primitive and violent, that you were conquered so easily because you are weak." Alina smiled grimly. "We are violent, our history is full of war and cruelty, but we also learned something important. We learned that we're stronger together. On our world we have a saying, united we stand, divided we fall. And you believe this applies here, to all of us." "I know it does. Look around you, Korax. The Zorath are powerful because they keep us separate, but together we outnumber them 1,000 to 1. Together we have skills and knowledge they can't imagine. Together we could shake the foundations of their empire." Korax was quiet for a long time, the light refracting through his body, casting dancing patterns on the tunnel walls. Finally, he spoke. "My people were once great builders. We created structures that touched the clouds and sang with the wind. The Zorath destroyed our cities and took our knowledge. I have spent 50 years believing that all was lost." He turned to face Alina, his faceted eyes reflecting her image 100 times. "I would like to believe again." The network grew. In Sector 7, then spreading to other sectors as trusted members were transferred or assigned to different areas. They developed secret signs and codes, ways of communicating that the Zorath could not understand. A scratch on a wall meant a meeting point. A certain hummed tune meant danger approaching. A hand gesture that looked casual to outsiders meant "I am one of you." Alina learned that every species had its own strengths. The Vichy had perfect memories and could recall detailed maps of any place they had been. The Chirathi were immensely strong and could survive conditions that would kill most other beings. The Surith could interface with electrical systems, their flame bodies able to channel and redirect power. The Korathi could withstand incredible punishment and had engineering knowledge far beyond human understanding. And the humans, Alina smiled when the others asked about human strengths. "We're adaptable," she told them. "We're stubborn, and we never ever give up." 1 year into her captivity, Alina's network had grown to include over 500 members from 43 different species. They called themselves the Unity in the privacy of their secret meetings, and they had begun to plan something beyond mere survival. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A cave-in in Sector 12 trapped over 100 workers, mostly Vichy and Chirathi. The Zorath response was predictable. They sealed the tunnels and wrote off the workers as acceptable losses. It was cheaper to let them die than to mount a rescue operation. Alina called an emergency meeting. "We have to save them," she said simply. "It's impossible," argued Finks, a cautious being from a species called the Whisperers. "The tunnels are blocked. The guards will stop any rescue attempt. We will expose ourselves for nothing." "If we do nothing, 100 of our brothers and sisters will die," Alina replied. "And more importantly, everyone will see that we are no different from the Zorath, that we will abandon our own when it becomes difficult. Is that what we want? Is that who we are?" Gronick stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the group. "I will help dig." "As will I," said Korax. "My body can withstand the pressure of the rubble." One by one, members of the Unity volunteered. They organized quickly, using the skills of each species. The Sureth disrupted the monitoring systems, creating blind spots in the security grid. The Vichy mapped alternative routes through abandoned tunnels. The Chirathi formed digging teams while the Korathi reinforced unstable passages. It took 3 days of secret work, 3 days of diverted supplies, hidden labor, and narrowly avoided patrols. But on the 4th morning, the rescue teams broke through to the trapped workers. Alina was there when they emerged, covered in dust and trembling with exhaustion but alive. An elderly Vichy woman gripped Alina's hand with surprising strength, tears streaming from her large eyes. "We thought we had been forgotten," she whispered. "We thought no one would come." "We are Unity," Alina replied, and she was surprised to find herself crying too. "We never leave anyone behind." The rescue changed everything. Word spread through the camp like wildfire. Different species had worked together to save lives that the Zoreth had deemed worthless. The old propaganda, the lies about each group being dangerous or untrustworthy, suddenly seemed hollow when compared to this undeniable truth. The Unity's membership doubled within a month, then tripled. Beings who had been afraid to hope began seeking out the secret meetings. They brought skills, knowledge, and most importantly, information. It was Sureth who delivered the most valuable piece of intelligence. The flame being had managed to tap into the Zorath communication network during one of her electrical disruptions. What she learned made Alina's heart race with possibility. "There is a ship," Sureth reported, her contained flames flickering with excitement. "An old transport vessel in the scrapyard at the edge of the camp. The Zorath have marked it for destruction, but it still functions, if we could reach it." "We could escape," Trill finished, her eyes wide. But Alina shook her head. "No, we could do something far more important. We could take our message beyond this camp. We could reach other planets, other labor facilities, other conquered species. We could start a revolution." The room fell silent. What Alina was proposing was beyond anything they had imagined. It was audacious. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of impossible dream that humans were famous for chasing. Gronak was the first to speak. "I am with you," he said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "And I," said Korex. One by one, the others added their voices, until the small space rang with the sound of dozens of species speaking as one. Alina looked at the beings around her, these strangers who had become family, and felt something she had not felt since the day she was captured. She felt like they might actually win. The plan to reach the ship took 3 months to prepare. Every detail had to be perfect because there would be no second chances. If they failed, the Zareth would execute them all and use their deaths as a warning to others. Alina divided the Unity into specialized teams. The Sureth would handle the power grid, creating a blackout that would disable the camp's security systems. The Vichy memorized every patrol route and timing, mapping paths to the scrapyard that avoided detection. The Chirathi would form the main breakout force, using their strength to clear obstacles. The Korathi would repair the ship and prepare it for flight. And the humans, all 12 of them now freed from various corners of the camp, would coordinate everything. "Why the humans?" Fanks asked during a planning session. The Whisperer had overcome his initial caution and become one of Alina's most trusted advisors. "You are the newest conquered. You have the least experience with Zorath ways." Mika laughed. "That's exactly why. We haven't learned to be afraid yet. We still believe impossible things can be done." "Besides," Alina added, "we're good at adapting. When the plan changes, and it will, we can think on our feet." The night of the escape was chosen carefully. A supply ship was scheduled to arrive, which would distract many of the guards. The weather forecasters among the Unity predicted a dust storm, which would provide cover. And the camp's senior overseer was away at a conference, leaving less experienced officers in charge. As the twin suns of Kareth Prime set, Alina gathered her closest allies for one final meeting. They stood in a forgotten storage room deep in the mines, the place where so many important conversations had happened. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, looking at each of them in turn, "I want you to know that the time I've spent with you has been the greatest honor of my life. You have taught me that courage has no species, that compassion knows no borders, that hope is the most powerful weapon in the universe." Trill stepped forward and pressed her small, furry hand against Alina's palm. "My people have a tradition," she said. "Before a great journey, we share our spirits. We become family in the truest sense." She looked around at the others. "I would like to share this with all of you." One by one, the members of the Unity added their hands, paws, claws, and tendrils to the circle. Beings who should have been enemies stood together, bound by something stronger than the chains that had held them. "Unity," Alina said softly. "Unity," they responded as one. The escape began at midnight. Surith and her team moved first, their contained flames slipping through the camp's power conduits like ghosts. At precisely the scheduled moment, every light in the facility flickered and died. In the darkness, the Unity moved. Hundreds of beings flowed through predetermined paths, guided by the Vichy scouts who could see perfectly in the absence of light. The Chirathi cleared blocked passages with silent efficiency. The Korathi had already reached the scrapyard and were working on the ship. Alina ran alongside Gronak and Trill, her heart pounding. The dust storm had arrived on schedule, reducing visibility to almost nothing. They passed empty guard stations and confused patrols, always staying one step ahead thanks to the Unity's coordination. But no plan survives contact with the enemy. They were halfway to the scrapyard when the backup generators kicked in. Emergency lights flooded the camp with harsh red illumination. Alarms began to wail. And then Alina heard the sound she had feared most of all, the distinctive whine of Zoreth combat drones powering up. "They were prepared," Fanks hissed, appearing beside her. "They knew we were coming." "It doesn't matter," Alina said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We go forward, pass the word. Everyone who can fight to the front. Everyone else keep moving to the ship." What followed was chaos. Combat drones descended on the escaping prisoners, their weapons blazing. But the Unity fought back with everything they had. Gronak caught a drone in his massive hands and tore it apart. Korax absorbed energy blasts and redirected them at attackers. The Surith overloaded drones by flooding them with power, causing them to explode in showers of sparks. And the humans fought too. They had no special powers, no enhanced strength or unique abilities, but they had determination, creativity, and an absolute refusal to give up. Mika used her medical knowledge to identify weak points in the Zoreth guard's armor. Others improvised weapons from mining tools. They fought dirty, they fought clever, and they fought with the fury of a species that had come too far to fail now. Alina reached the scrapyard just as the ship's engines roared to life. The vessel was old and scarred, but the Korathi had worked miracles. It was ready to fly. "Get everyone aboard," she shouted over the noise of battle. "We're leaving now." The evacuation was frantic. Beings poured into the ship, filling every available space. Mika set up an emergency treatment area for the wounded. Korax ran to the engine room to manage the ancient power systems, and Alina climbed to the ship's small command deck, where she found an unexpected ally waiting. The being was tall and pale, with features that seemed stretched like melted wax. Alina recognized the species from Trill's descriptions. A Gen, one of the oldest conquered peoples, who had once been legendary pilots. "I am Vorth," the Gen said in a voice like distant bells. "For 60 years I have worked in the scrapyard, forgotten and alone. Tonight I fly again." His strange eyes met Alina's. "For Unity." "For Unity," Alina replied, and she couldn't help but smile despite everything. Vorth's hands moved across the control panel with fluid grace. The ship shuddered and began to rise. Outside, Alina could see Zorath fighters scrambling to intercept them. But the old transport was faster than it looked, and Vorth was as skilled as the legends claimed. They broke through the atmosphere in a hail of weapons fire, leaving Kareth Prime behind. As the planet shrank in the viewscreen, Alina allowed herself a moment to breathe. They had done it. Against all odds, they had escaped. But she knew this was only the beginning. "How many did we save?" she asked Trill, who had appeared beside her. 712, the Vichy replied, "from 51 species." "And how many did we lose?" Trill's eyes were sad. 133. They fought so that others could reach the ship. Alina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those deaths. Each one was a life that had mattered, a being who had believed in something greater than themselves. She would carry their memory with her always. "We need to find more allies," she said finally, opening her eyes. "We need to spread the word to every conquered world, every labor camp, every enslaved species. The unity started with a handful of prisoners in a mining camp, but it can become something much larger. It has to." Vorth spoke from the pilot's station. "I know places," he said, "hidden worlds where the Zorath's reach is weak, resistant cells that have survived in secret for centuries. They have heard rumors of a human woman who united different species. They will want to meet you." Alina looked around the cramped command deck at her fellow escapees, beings of all shapes and sizes, united by a common cause. This was just the beginning, she knew. The road ahead would be long and bloody. Many more would die before the end. But for the first time in 300 years, the conquered species of the Zorath Empire had hope. And hope, as Alina had learned, was the most dangerous thing of all. "Set a course," she said to Vorth. "It's time to start a revolution." 5 years passed, and the galaxy changed. What had begun as a desperate escape from a mining camp had grown into something that shook the foundations of the Zorath Empire. The unity spread like fire across dry grass, jumping from world to world, system to system. Wherever there were oppressed beings, the unity's message found fertile ground. "You are not alone. We stand together. Freedom is possible." Alina stood on the bridge of the Liberation, the flagship of the Unity fleet. It was a far cry from the battered transport they had escaped on all those years ago. The Liberation was a converted Zorath battleship, captured during a daring raid that had cost many lives but had proven that the Empire could be beaten. Around her, officers from a dozen different species worked in perfect coordination. A Vichy communications specialist monitored encrypted channels. A Tirathi weapons officer stood ready at the tactical station. A human pilot from Earth's resistance worked alongside a Gen navigator. The bridge was a living symbol of what the Unity had become. "Admiral Vasquez," Trill said, approaching with a data pad. The small Vichy had become Alina's chief of intelligence, her perfect memory and network of contacts proving invaluable. "We've received word from the Surith front. They've taken the fuel depot at Korax 7. The Zorath fleet in that sector will be stranded within a month." Alina nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the current state of the war. 2 years ago, the Unity had controlled only a handful of hidden bases. Now, they held nearly a quarter of Zorath space. 37 species had officially joined the rebellion, and more were joining every day. "What about the talks with the Emrenathi?" she asked. The Emrenathi were a powerful species who had never been conquered by the Zorath, maintaining an uneasy neutrality. Their support could tip the balance of the war. "They're cautious," Trill replied. 300 years of watching the Zorath dominate has made them wary, but they're willing to listen. Your reputation has spread even to neutral space." Alina smiled grimly. Her reputation. The Zorath had put a price on her head that was larger than the budget of most star systems. They called her the human devil, the breaker of chains, the one who had destroyed the natural order. Among the freed species, she had other names. The Spark, the first friend, the mother of unity. She didn't feel like any of those things. She was just a starship captain who had refused to accept that oppression was inevitable. Everything that followed had come from that single choice. Gronak's massive form appeared in the doorway. The Chirathi general had become Elena's closest military advisor, his gentle nature hiding a brilliant tactical mind. "Admiral, we have a problem." "Show me," Elena said, following him to the strategy room. The holographic display showed the Zorath core worlds, the heavily defended heart of the Empire. And at the center, Zorath Prime itself, where the Supreme Council ruled over their vast domain. "Our intelligence reports a massive fleet gathering here," Gronak said, pointing to a sector near the edge of Zorath-controlled space. 300 warships, maybe more. They're not defending. They're preparing to attack. "Where?" Elena asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "Earth." The word hit Elena like a physical blow. Earth, her homeworld, the place where her family still lived, still fought, still hoped for liberation. "They're trying to draw us out," Korax observed. The crystal being had become Elena's chief engineer, his knowledge having rebuilt half the ships in their fleet. "They know you cannot ignore a threat to your home." "It's a trap," agreed Sureth, who had arrived during the discussion. "If we divert our forces to defend Earth, we leave our other fronts vulnerable. The Empire could reclaim dozens of worlds while we're distracted." They were right. Elena knew they were right. From a purely strategic perspective, Earth was one world among many. The Unity had to think of the greater good, of all the species they were fighting to free. But Elena had learned something in her years of building the Unity. She had learned that the greater good was made up of countless individual goods, that you couldn't fight for everyone by abandoning anyone, that the moment you started calculating which lives were acceptable losses, you became no better than your enemy. "We defend Earth," she said. Sureth's flames flickered with surprise. "Admiral, the risks." "I know the risks," Elena interrupted. "But Earth isn't just another world, it's a symbol. Humanity joined this fight as the newest conquered, with nothing to offer but determination. If we abandon them now, what message does that send to every other species? That when things get hard, we'll throw them aside." She looked around the room at her advisors, these beings who had become family. "The Unity's strength isn't our ships or our weapons. It's our bond. It's the knowledge that we will never abandon each other. That's what makes us different from the Zorath. That's what will win this war." There was a moment of silence. Then Gronak nodded slowly. "We defend Earth," he said, "and we make the Zorath regret ever threatening it." One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Within hours, the Unity fleet was on the move, racing toward Earth for what everyone knew would be the largest battle of the war. The journey took 2 weeks. Elena spent much of that time planning with her commanders, but she also spent time walking among the crew, talking with the ordinary soldiers who would risk everything in the coming fight. She found Mika in the medical bay, preparing for the casualties they both knew were coming. "You could have stayed behind," Elena told her old friend. "Your skills are too valuable to risk." Mika laughed, the sound unchanged from the day they had first met in that prison camp. "And missed the chance to go home. Not a chance," she sobered. "I haven't seen Earth in 7 years, Elena. 7 years of fighting, and sometimes I wondered if we'd ever make it back. Now, one way or another, I'm going to see the sky again." Elena embraced her, this woman who had been with her from nearly the beginning. "We'll see it together," she promised, "and it will be free." When the Unity fleet emerged from hyperspace in Earth's solar system, they found the Zorath armada already waiting. 300 warships formed a wall of metal between the fleet and Earth, their weapons powered and ready. And beyond them, visible on the view screen, was Earth itself, blue and green and brown, spinning slowly against the darkness of space. Elena had seen many worlds in her years of war, but none of them took her breath away like this one. "All ships battle stations," she commanded, her voice calm despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Today, we show the Zarath what the Unity is capable of. Today, we fight for Earth. The Zarath flagship hailed them. The face that appeared on the view screen was familiar. Supreme Commander Zorak, the highest military leader in the Empire, whose cruelty was legendary throughout the galaxy. "Human," Zorak said, his scales rippling with contempt. "You have caused much trouble, but it ends today. Surrender now and we will spare your precious homeworld. Resist and we will burn it to ash." Alina smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You know, Zorak, 5 years ago I was a prisoner in one of your minds. I had nothing. No weapons, no ships, no army, just an idea. And that idea has grown into this." She gestured at the fleet behind her. 150 ships, crewed by members of 90 different species, all united against you. Do you really think we're going to surrender now? Zorak's scales darkened with anger. "Then you will die." "Maybe," Alina agreed, "but not today and not to you." She cut the transmission and turned to face her crew. "All ships," she said, "attack." The Battle of Earth would be remembered for 1,000 years. The Unity fleet surged forward to meet the Zarath armada, and space itself seemed to burn with weapons fire. Ships exploded in brilliant flares of light. Fighters swarmed between the larger vessels like angry insects, and at the heart of it all, the Liberation pushed toward the enemy flagship. Alina watched the battle unfold on the tactical display, making decisions that sent hundreds to their deaths and saved thousands of others. She had long ago accepted this burden. Every commander knew that war meant choosing who lived and who died. The best she could do was make those deaths count. "The Zarath left flank is weakening," Granak reported. "The Chirathi assault teams have broken through their formation." "Surath Squadron has disabled their command relay," added Trill. "Their fleet coordination is failing." For a moment, Alina allowed herself to hope. They were winning. Despite being outnumbered 2-1, the Unity's coordination and determination were proving stronger than Zarath numbers and firepower. Then the hyperspace signatures appeared. "Admiral," the sensor officer said, his voice tight with fear. "Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. It's the rest of the Zarath fleet, every ship they have left." Alina watched as new markers flooded the tactical display. 500 ships, 600, 700. The Zarath had committed everything they had. This wasn't just a battle. It was their final attempt to crush the rebellion once and for all. "We can't win this," Fenks said quietly. "There are too many." For a long moment, Alina said nothing. She looked at Earth on the view screen, at the home she had fought so long to reach. She thought of all the beings who had given their lives for this moment, for the dream of freedom. Then she smiled. "Open a channel to all ships," she said, "and to Earth. I want everyone to hear this." When the channel opened, Alina spoke words that would echo through history. "This is Admiral Alina Vasquez of the Unity Fleet. The Zarath have brought everything they have to destroy us today. They think that numbers and weapons will be enough to break our spirit, but they don't understand what they're fighting. They see only ships and soldiers. They don't see the bond that holds us together. They don't see the love we have for each other, for freedom, for the simple right to live without chains." She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. Beings from a dozen different worlds, all looking back at her with fierce determination. 5 years ago, I was a prisoner on Karath Prime. I had nothing but a dream. A dream that beings from every corner of this galaxy could stand together, not as conquered peoples, but as free individuals united by choice. Today, that dream stands with us. And I promise you this, the Zarath will not win. Not today, not ever, because you cannot defeat a dream with weapons. You cannot kill hope with battleships. As long as one of us still stands, the Unity survives. She raised her fist in the gesture that had become the symbol of their movement. For unity, for freedom, for all of us. The response came from across the fleet, from 150 ships crewed by 90 species. The same words spoken in 100 different voices. For unity. And then something impossible happened. New hyperspace signatures appeared, but these were not Zorath ships. The first to emerge was the Emranathi battle fleet, their massive crystalline vessels gleaming in the light of distant stars. Behind them came ships from a dozen other neutral powers, species that had watched the war from the sidelines, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. "Admiral Vasquez," came a voice over the communication channel. It was the Emranathi High Commander, his translated words formal but warm. "We have watched your unity grow from a whisper to a roar. We have seen beings who were taught to hate each other learn to love instead. We have seen the impossible become possible. Today, we join your cause. Today, we stand with unity." More ships kept emerging. The Gentari Collective, the Worlds of Silence, the remnant fleet of a dozen conquered species that had maintained hidden bases for centuries. They had all seen Elena's broadcast. They had all heard the call. And they had answered. The tide of battle turned in an instant. What had seemed like certain defeat became an overwhelming victory. The Zorath fleet, suddenly outnumbered 3-1, began to crumble. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries burned and died under the combined fire of all the species they had oppressed. Supreme Commander Zorak tried to rally his forces, tried to regain control. But there was no control to be had. The Empire's greatest strength, the fear it had spread among the conquered peoples, had become its greatest weakness. 300 years of cruelty had created an ocean of hatred, and now that ocean was rising to drown them. The Liberation closed in on the Zorath flagship. Its shields failed under concentrated fire from dozens of allied vessels. Its engines went dark, and when Elena led the boarding party onto the command deck, she found Zorak waiting, his scales flickering rapidly between colors she had never seen before. "This is impossible," the Supreme Commander hissed. "We had everything. We ruled the galaxy. How could you destroy it all?" Elena looked at him. This creature had ordered the deaths of billions, had built an empire on the suffering of countless species. She had every right to hate him, every reason to desire revenge. But hatred was what the Zorath understood. Hatred was what they had used to keep their conquered peoples divided. And Elena had learned in her long journey from prisoner to admiral that there was a better way. "You ruled through fear," she said quietly. "You kept us separate because you knew that together we were stronger than you. You were right, we are, but you never understood why." She gestured to the beings behind her. Human, Vishi, Tirathi, Korathi, Surath. Different shapes, different origins, different histories, all standing as one. "It's not our ships or our weapons that make us strong. It's our choice to stand together. It's love, Commander. Love for freedom, love for each other, love for the possibility of something better. And love is something you can never defeat." Zorak was taken into custody. The Zorath fleet surrendered. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived in chains saw those chains finally break. The war continued for another year as the last remnants of the Empire were dismantled, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Supreme Council fell. The slave camps were liberated. Species that had been conquered for centuries breathed free air for the first time in generations. And on Earth, in a ceremony broadcast to every corner of the liberated galaxy, representatives from 217 species gathered to sign the Charter of Unity. This new alliance would not be an empire. It would be a partnership of equals, where every species had a voice and every being had rights. It would be built on the foundation that Elena had laid in that prison camp so many years ago. The understanding that diversity was strength, that compassion was power, and that hope could move mountains. Elena stood at the podium, looking out over the crowd. She saw Trill, who had become the first Vichy ambassador. She saw Granak, who was now the commander of the Unity's peacekeeping forces. She saw Korax and Surath and Finks and so many others, beings who had started as strangers and had become family. She saw Mika, standing in the front row with tears streaming down her face and a smile that could light up the stars. 12 years ago, Alina began, her voice carrying across the vast assembly, I was captured by the Zoreth Empire and sent to a mining camp on Kareth Prime. I was told that I was nothing, that I would work until I died, that resistance was pointless. But I found something in that camp that the Zoreth never expected. I found friends. I found family. I found unity. She paused, remembering all the beings who had not lived to see this day. The 133 who had died in the escape. The thousands who had fallen in the battles that followed. The millions who had spent their lives in chains, dreaming of a freedom they would never know. Today, we honor their memory by building something new. Not an empire, but a community. Not a collection of conquered species, but a family of free peoples. We are different, yes. We see the universe in different ways, value different things, dream different dreams. But we have learned something that the Zoreth never understood. Our differences are not weaknesses to be exploited. They are strengths to be celebrated. She raised her hand in the familiar gesture. The Charter of Unity is not just a document. It is a promise that we will never again allow any species to dominate another. A promise that we will stand together against tyranny wherever it arises. A promise that the galaxy we build will be worthy of those who gave their lives to make it possible. The assembly rose as one, beings from 217 species, and raised their own hands, claws, tendrils, and appendages in response. The sound of their voices, speaking the word unity in hundreds of languages, washed over Alina like a wave. Later, when the ceremonies were over and the crowds had dispersed, Alina walked alone through the garden where the charter had been signed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Trill found her there, standing beneath a tree that had been planted to commemorate the day. "You did it," the Vichy said softly. "You actually did it." Alina shook her head. "We did it, all of us. I just helped people see what was already possible." "That's what makes humans special," Trill said. "You see possibilities where others see only obstacles. You believe in things before they exist, and somehow your belief makes them real." Alina smiled, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, on 1,000 different worlds, beings were going to sleep tonight knowing they were free, knowing they were not alone, knowing they were part of something greater than themselves. The Zoreth Empire had crumbled not because of human weapons or human technology, but because of a simple human idea. The idea that strangers could become friends, that enemies could become allies, that the bonds of love and trust were stronger than any chain. It had started with a single choice in a mining camp, a choice to help instead of harm, to reach out instead of pull away. And from that small seed, a new galaxy had grown. "What now?" Trill asked. Alina looked at her oldest friend, this small being who had believed in her when no one else did. "Now," she said, "we start the real work, building, not destroying, healing, not fighting, making sure that what we've created lasts for generations." She put her arm around Trill's shoulders. Together. Together, it was such a simple word, but it contained everything that mattered. The stars shone down on a galaxy transformed, and somewhere in the vast darkness, new possibilities were waiting to be born.